India has responded to the Financial Times story which claimed that the United States had recently thwarted a plot to kill Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Pannun on American soil. India has stated that it is examining US inputs on the nexus between organized criminals, gun runners, terrorists and others. The statement from the Ministry of External Affairs says India takes such inputs seriously since it impinges on our own national security interests as well. Issues in the context of US inputs are already being examined by the relevant departments. Earlier in the day, the White House had said the US was treating a reported plot to kill a Sikh separatist on American soil with utmost seriousness and had raised the issue with the Indian government at the senior-most levels. Asked about the Financial Times report, White House spokesperson Adrian Watson said Indian counterparts had expressed surprise and concern and stated that activity of this nature was not their policy. We understand the Indian government is further investigating this issue and we will have more to say about it in the coming days. We've conveyed our expectation that anyone deemed responsible should be held accountable. Quoting unnamed sources, the Financial Times had carried a report saying the US informed India about concerns regarding an alleged plot to kill Gurpatwant Singh Pannun, the founder of the band Sikhs for Justice. The report said the US authorities also issued a warning to India over concerns that the government in New Delhi was involved. Pannu is a dual citizen of the United States and Canada. Now, this report came 2 months after Canada claimed that there were credible allegations linking Indian agents to the murder of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar in June. India rejected the allegation and sought evidence from Canada. On Monday, India's premier anti-terror organization, the National Investigation Agency, filed a case against Pannun, accusing him of issuing social media threats, claiming that people flying Air India were in danger. He had also claimed that Air India would not be allowed to operate on the 19th of November. Let's now look at the Financial Times story in some more detail. It says it's not clear whether America's protest to New Delhi led the plotters to abandon their plan or whether the FBI intervened and foiled a scheme already in motion. The US informed some allies about the plot following the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a Khalistani terrorist and Canadian citizen killed in Vancouver in June. In September, Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said there were credible allegations linking New Delhi to Nijjar's fatal shooting. A source has been quoted as saying the US protest was issued after Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a high-profile state visit to Washington in June. Separate from the diplomatic warning, US federal prosecutors have filed a sealed indictment against at least one alleged perpetrator of the plot in a New York district court. The US Justice Department is debating whether to unseal the indictment and make the allegations public or wait until Canada finishes its investigation into Nijjar's murder. The report also claims that one person charged in the indictment is believed to have left the US. The US Justice Department and the FBI have declined to comment on the matter. The National Security Council said the US does not comment on ongoing law enforcement matters or private diplomatic discussions with our partners, but added upholding the safety and security of US citizens is paramount. Washington shared details of the Pannun case with a wider group of allies after Trudeau went public with details of the Vancouver killing, the combination of which sparked concern among allies about a possible pattern of behavior. As we said, India has rejected Canada's claims about New Delhi's possible involvement in Nijjar's murder as absurd and politically motivated. Pannun issued yet another threat this month by issuing a video in which he warned Sikhs not to fly Air India because it would be life-threatening. Washington has urged India to cooperate with the Canadian investigation but has not expressed any criticism of New Delhi. Financial Times goes on to say the Biden administration views India, a member of the Quad security group along with Japan and Australia, as a critical part of a broader strategy to counter China. The report claims that officials in the Biden administration were aware that any public disclosure of the US plot and Washington's protest to New Delhi would renew questions about India's reliability as a trusted partner. Remember, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was feted this summer in Washington, where he delivered a speech to the US Congress. President Joe Biden said the US-India relationship would be one of the defining partnerships of the 21st century. There have earlier been reports, though, suggesting that Biden raised the Canadian allegations with Prime Minister Modi at the G20 summit held in New Delhi in September. The White House declined to say whether Biden raised the Pannun case at that time. US Ambassador to Canada David Cohen also said in September that Ottawa had received information about the Niger case from the intelligence sharing network Five Eyes, which comprises the US, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. India has accused Canada, the UK, and other countries with large Indian diaspora communities of being too tolerant of members of the Sikh separatist movement, many of whom are designated terrorists in India and wanted in multiple cases. During a visit to Washington in September, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar stated at an event that Ottawa had a very permissive attitude towards Sikh separatists because of Canadian politics. So what do these latest developments really mean? Let's discuss this with our panel of experts. Joining me on the show tonight, Ambassador K.P. Fabian, former Indian diplomat, Yashovardhan Azad, former Special Director with the Intelligence Bureau. They join us from New Delhi, and completing the panel tonight is Irina Sukerman, National Security Analyst. She joins us live from New York. Thank you so much to all three of my guests for joining me. Yashovardhan Azad, let me begin with you. Right on this show, a few weeks ago, we discussed and debated ad nauseum Justin Trudeau's wild allegations against India, accusing it of being involved in the killing of Niger, which happened in the month of June. Now you have this Financial Times report claiming that the US thwarted a plot to assassinate Pannun on American soil, and that this is a matter that has been raised by the US authorities with New Delhi, and New Delhi has taken cognizance of it and said, we take this matter very seriously. But at the same time, New Delhi has told the United States that we are surprised by these reports because this is not our official policy. The waters seem to have been really muddied in all of this. What do you make of this latest report?
Well, in terms of the contents of the allegations or the act which is being alluded to, the Indian Indians, I think we have the same kind of information we had on Niger, which is with respect to Pannun too. So it is very difficult to comment, though the additional information which you've given is that they have moved the court also in New York against a particular individual. And the only thing is that they don't want to make it public right now because they don't want to talk about the law enforcement actions, and which sort of falls in the diplomatic area. Now, mind you, I don't understand this connection, waiting the case to unravel before, commenting on this or saying something about this. Because in the case of Niger, since you refer to Financial Times, Washington Post had come out, with an article which said that the investigation into the case of appeared a little, wanting in respect of professional requirements. Even the people who are around the area but not really questioned. We haven't got any credible evidence as such against individuals. So far, the thing is, again, in a kind of a labyrinth of various, subterfuges and now, in this particular case, I would have been very happy if the Americans would have also unraveled the plot behind his statement, in which he said that from 19, the Sikhs should not fly near India. And especially with the past, the Kanishka bomb being extremely important, because Pannun is a known India beta from the 6th January, where he announced lakhs of money for cutting off the head of, various personages, constitutional people in India, or funding extremist activities in Punjab. It would be extremely important for us to collaborate with the American agencies to find out what is he actually up. In fact, Sikh for Justice is behind almost every activity in Punjab which is against the state or against the nation. By and by, these things are being unraveled, which is being looked at by the national investigative agencies. So my final comment would be that yes, they have made an allegation. The MEA has given a proper formal reply that we look into it, because this kind of a nexus between the terrorist organized criminals is something to be looked at, and especially when India is being affected and impacted severely because of these activities in Canada and America. This is an important thing.
Yashovardhan Azad, all right, we seem to be having a bit of a problem there with that link to Azad. Let me see if we can get him back on air. Mr. Azad, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I believe you have to leave the show in a couple of minutes. So I just want to ask you a couple of quick questions. I think you make a very valid point. We're talking about a man who has openly issued threats to Indians, not once, but several times over, including in recent months, whether it was, targeting Indian diplomats in Canada or telling Sikhs not to fly Air India on the 19th of November. I think you're absolutely right that since he is a citizen of both Canada and the United States, Canada and the US should explain to India why this man is getting away with making these sort of threats. These should be answerable to us for that, and I wonder if that's already been raised by Dr. Jaishankar with his American counterpart. But the question that I want to put to you is this: do you find it interesting that India's response to the Canadian allegations was very different from the kind of measured and nuanced response that has been issued to the Financial Times story and to what the US officials seem to be claiming? Because on that occasion, India said this is absurd, it's politically motivated, we do not act in this fashion. Where is the evidence? In this case, India is saying we take this very seriously, this impacts our national interest as well, and we are going to look into this matter. Why do you think this difference in India's response between then and now?
Well, there's a reason. We have had problems with Canada for a long time. Mind you, Canada has been also sheltering the LTT the militants and their financing, and the Lankan government was extremely upset. And so we've had this problem right from the beginning, from the Kanishka bombing case, where it was not looked into properly. And later on, even the commission said that it was a very shoddy kind of an operation. So given the relation of this kind, I think our reaction was very, very strong. In the case of US is a strategic partner. And we are collaborating with the United States on so many, many things. And I would say that we share much, much more important things strategically for us to give that kind of information. And I think on that count, because we consider, we take US very, very seriously, and we are the strategic partners, and that's why we have given this reaction. Yes, we will look into it, and I hope we also collaborate on other security matters, which I have pointed out just now.
Final question, Mr. Azad, before we let you go. What do you make of this development that Financial Times has reported, where it says that, US federal prosecutors have filed a sealed indictment against one alleged perpetrator of this plot in a New York district court, and the US Justice Department is debating whether to unseal the indictment and make the allegations public or wait for Canada to finish its investigation into Nijar's murder. And let's not forget that there is this whole Five Eyes network which is also at play here.
Well, I said earlier that I don't understand this connection between Nijar case and Pannun case. If there is something, you have a real credible evidence, I think you can just go ahead. I mean, one thing is good, that they have not sort of unsealed it. They are not bringing it out in the open, because there are these conditions of, the sensitivities involved, whether it's diplomatic, security-wise, and otherwise. But I would say that if you're finding anything like that, I mean, you just go ahead. In this case, I think the answer has been appropriate that we'll collaborate on this particular issue. And yes, the person being referred to, it's also mentioned that he has left the country. If it's alluding to a diplomat or somebody I'm not aware of. So the lack of information on these two cases, prevents from making some very, substantive judgment on this particular case. We will definitely, wait for more information on this count.
We certainly need more information on that note. Yashovardhan Azad, thank you so much for joining us on Global Lens. As always, a pleasure to have you on the show. Uh, let me now go across to my other guests. Irina Sukuman, if I could come to you now. What more can you tell us about this Financial Times report, which claims that the US thwarted a plot to assassinate this man called Pannun, who, by the way, is a designated terrorist in India, and he has very publicly issued threats to Indians on multiple occasions. This is not a matter of secret. But I just read out an excerpt from the Financial Times report that the US Justice Department is debating whether to unseal the indictment that they filed in a New York district court in this particular matter, whether to make it public, whether to wait for Canada to complete its investigation. We don't know, as our previous speaker said, whether the Nijjar case in Canada and the Pannun case in the US are even linked. But what do you think is really going on here, especially with regard to federal prosecutors in the US filing this indictment in the New York District Court? What more can you tell us about that?
Well, this whole story comes at a time when another publication, The Diplomat, reported the deaths of several Khalistani extremists under mysterious circumstances in other countries, essentially establishing a pattern of somebody going after these individuals and raising the question of whether India has, quote unquote, an assassination program. Whether such an assassination program exists or not, it's very clear that intelligence agencies all over the world have a policy of not letting active threats, trying to prevent active threats from materializing, and that includes occasionally taking them out before they come to fruition. What makes a difference here is that US is an ally of India. It takes its national sovereignty concerns very seriously, and of course this matter is extremely sensitive, which is why there is a reluctance to politicize the issue by debating it in public and by unsealing this indictment, especially since US has already raised those concerns during the Canada investigation, and if this case has been, if this attempted assassination happened at all, and if it happened at the same time, concurrently to the Canadian event, and not at some point later after those discussions were already being held, there seems to be no reason to bring it up from the US government's perspective now, if that has already been handled, if it's not a new event where discussions were ignored and so forth and so on. So US is trying to limit political damage. It's trying to prevent publicity from deteriorating relations. The question is how did the US how did the Financial Times get a hold of this discussion to begin with? Why is it bringing it up now as opposed to closer to the time when these events and discussions allegedly occurred? Now, there's a very good point that was made earlier, which is this individual made what appeared to be an active threat, a terrorist attack. And there, in general, political operatives, separatists, and so forth in US and Canada are treated as political dissidents as a position so long as their political positions are peaceful. If they engage in political dialogue over the creation of a new state, they are considered legitimate opposition and are granted protection. But once they cross the line into any sort of involvement in subversive and violent activity, they lose the right to that sort of protection. Now, this individual is a US citizen, he would be entitled to due legal process in the United States up until the point that he made this concrete threat. There has not been any publication in the media in the US alleging that he was involved in anything encouraging violence. Now, India has asked for his arrest multiple times. It may be an issue of legal differences that India assesses terrorism and involvement in terrorism differently, or it may be that the evidence that this individual, that Pannun, was involved directly in violent and subversive activity exists, but it has not been presented to the public in the United States. That has become a problem because now it's difficult to argue, to make the case to the public that the U.S. government has known for years that this individual is not merely a peaceful dissident, that he is in fact a terrorist who's been involved in plotting attacks which took place in India, and we have seen violence
Absolutely.
over the summer.
You make a very